The comeback. I find that the way I am treated in any company depends upon the state of mind I bring into it. If I enter a circle of men and women whom I take to be superior to me, I am likely to be snubbed. If I impute to them the feeling that I am inferior, I will not fail to be inferior. If I am self-confident, I awaken confidence. If I cringe, I make others want to step on me. If I am cheerful, cheerfulness is handed me by others. If I am grouchy and snappy, they will bite me. People go at me about the way I go at them. There is a law in physics to the effect that action is equal to reaction. The ball rebounds from the wall with precisely the force with which it was thrown against the wall. And if I approach a man with politeness, I usually receive politeness. I get from this world a smile for a smile, a kick for a kick, love for love, and hate for hate. Of course there are exceptions to this rule, but if there were no rule, there would be no exceptions. And the difference between the man who knows how to play a game and wins regularly, any game, including poker and the game of life, and the man who steadily loses, is that the wise man sticks to the rules and the law of averages, and the fool has a hunch and stakes his all on the exceptions. A good definition of a fool is one who thinks that this time doesn't count. My tablets, therefore. Meet it is I set it down that I am getting what is coming to me. This is a world of law. Chance is to be found only in the dictionary. In the bright lexicon of fact, there's no such word. If I am petulant, unrestful, irritable, unsatisfied, wretched, and bored, I know the crop, and might have expected the harvest when I sowed that seed of self-indulgence, lack of will, moral cowardice, and general selfishness. If I am lonely, it was I who drove hearts away. If I am bitter, it was I who skimped the sugar bowl. If I am persecuted, it was I who brought it on by my cantankerousness. The loving are beloved, the generous are helped, the considerate are considered, the bully by and by is bullied, the smasher smashed. And the end of the hog is the slaughterhouse. There are no victims of fate. The hero always rises above tragedy. The noble soul is never more serene than when all creation thinks it has downed him. Power and humility. One trait that I find in every great man I have met is something that might be called egotism, and yet it is not egotism. It is a certain unshakable belief in self, a feeling that oneself is in some way linked with the processes of fate, a sense of the inevitableness of one's life. Curious to say, this consciousness of the importance of self is not at all inconsistent with the most genuine humility. In fact, the very greatest character I can imagine would be one who would make no account of his weaknesses, sins, and failures, of the malice of his enemies, nor of the admiration of his friends, but who set most store on his own impulses, words, and deeds, as being to him the most vital and meaningful facts of the universe. Hence, his humility would spring from the consciousness of his own power and the worth of his own acts and sayings, and not, as with us, from a sense of his worthlessness and impotence. Away beyond the powerful man who grasps wealth, fame, political place, and applause, is the kind of man who is so conscious of his power that he does not care for these things. Only in the soul possessing the highest degree of power is there genuine humility. The ideal and the job. A young man writes me wanting to know how to decide between sticking to his ideals and earning a living. He is an artist. As such, shall he paint only as the divine afflatus moves him, for which the money he gets is uncertain and small? Or shall he lower himself to drawing illustrations for cigarette and soap advertisements where profits are large? When he takes his work to the publisher, the latter says, "I don't know much about art, but I know what the public wants, and you must change this, that, and the other thing." Shall he submit to this dictation, or stand for his own genius? My answer is, cherish your own vision by all means, for creative work without the heat of one's own peculiar inspiration is poor stuff. But there are several points to be noted. In the first place, you want to be rather sure what your ideals are, and to find that out, it is necessary to wrestle with the workaday world. Not only is labour the test of inspiration, it is also the channel of inspiration. Our private convictions are not much good until they are kneaded into the events that come to us from destiny. Our environment is an integral factor of our personality. We do not know what we are without passing through experience, which means that we are the resulting compound of the force that is in us and the forces that act upon us. Another thing, the first duty of a man is not to follow his ideals. It is rather to do some kind of work the world is willing to pay for. It is to earn a living, to take himself off the backs of other people, to present to mankind a marketable equivalent for the bread, shelter, and warmth given him. The Apostle Paul sewed tents for a living, and only wrote his epistles after he had sold enough of his labour to get something to eat. And it is not degrading to any man to do with his might what his hand finds to do, to provide for his wife and babies. I like the story, printed in a Chicago paper, of a young man of 19 who has already accumulated almost $2,000 by writing stories for magazines, yet who goes right on clerking in a hardware store, confining his literary activities to his spare time. We would be saved a deal of callow tragedy if all young men and women of genius would hang on to their job while setting forth to make a living by art and letters. Besides this, it must be remembered that the same deity that gives you your driving genius has made also the world you live in, and it is not unreasonable to suppose that that world is as much inspired in its way as you in yours. John Wesley used to say to his young preachers something to the effect that when God calls a man to preach, he calls somebody to hear him. Let us not despise our time, nor the people of it, nor the demands of it. If we learn to understand and interpret our surroundings, to feel the zeitgeist, to read the message of events, and to know and love the people whom fate sends us, and if we respond to the wants of the world with all the talent we have, and seek to serve humanity instead of to criticize, uplift, boss, and scold it, we shall find ourselves much more quickly, and be not only true to our own ideals, but be a whole heap more agreeable to the folks that have to do with us. An opportunity for a new writer. Are we a nation of snobs? Are we given up wholly to the fevered itch for getting on? Do we all chase money and fame with breathless eagerness and howl with self-pity when we fail? These questions one may well ask on reading the contents of the average American magazine and novel. Modern literature may be divided into two classes. First, the description of the doings and undoings of the rich. Second, the description of the wretchedness of the poor. Most light and cheerful stories are of young gentlemen who loaf in clubs, own yachts, and spend millions, and of limousine ladies who can't do up their own hair. Another class of writers who make show of writing truth depict the horrible condition of the poor, of the wretched victims of social injustice who have to work for a living. The whole point of view of both classes is sickening. As a matter of fact, the great broad river of happiness flows through the homes of the plain, ordinary United States folks that work for wages, ride on streetcars, live decently with wife and children, mind their own business, and are not eternally soured because they are not wealthy. These people the snobs despise, the classes curse, and the agitators regard as imbecile. Yet they are the real backbone of the nation. The greatest novelist that ever lived was Charles Dickens, and he was great because he sensed the wonder and beauty of the common life. His poor people were not sitting around with scowling faces planning a revolution. They were eating roast beef and pudding. In their homes were cheer and glee, love and loyalty. He was the one genius who knew what humanity means. Unhappiness, perversion, and evil are to be found in all walks of life, but as a rule they abound more in the lives of the idle and endowed than in the lives of those who toil for their daily bread. If any young writer is looking about for a field of endeavour that will bring him undying fame, let him set before him as his life task the business of interpreting the joy, the goodness, and the nobleness of the common lives about him. It is time for a new Dickens. We have had enough of the elegant and refined stuff that is devoured by the servant girl element, enough of the girls of our class and the college-bred men and millionaires' children. Also enough of the glooms of Ernest Poole and Upton Sinclair. Give us something wholesome, genuine, lovable, manly. There are thousands of United States families where father is faithful and mother is strong and true, where the boys and girls are brave and cheerful, where there are merry dinners and hearty frolics, old-fashioned love-making, babies crowing, and the love of mankind and the fear of God all through the atmosphere. Let's have some of it. And take your bally social rotters with their artificial snobisms and your working men horrors with their imported grouches. Take them to the dump heap. Give us a little plain humanity. Nothing has such a punch. Nothing would be more eagerly read. And tell me, why is a cheap and heated young author who wades you through pages of misery and squalor, which is the easiest thing in the world to do, why is he called strong? I cannot understand it, unless it be for the same reason we call butter strong.